What is up, everybody? Mark on the mic here. I am joined by Mr. Erik Barber and Mr. Corey Eliason. Guys, precast, we talked about steelhead fishing, grouse hunting, archery deer hunting, rifle hunting, how Corey should do more archery hunting, and everything in between. And those are all great topics, but they're not what we're going to talk about for the meat of this podcast, which is Vortex Edges Hunter Marksmanship course.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which, Erik, you're a recent graduate.
Recent grad. Yep.
Oh
Not at the top of the class, but I was in the. I graduated.
Yeah.
Corey, what? You're one of the instructors
Yep.
at Vortex Edge. Yep. You were one of Erik's professors the other week. What? Tell us about the Hunter Marksmanship course. And you know what it is and the core of it, and then I've got some follow-up questions for you.
Yeah. So our Hunter Marksmanship course is just kind of a class we designed for, somebody that has a little bit of hunting experience or maybe no hunting experience, but can just kind of navigate their way around a firearm safely, and they're looking to extend their capability to a reasonable degree. So we take people into the class, we kind of, do the typical stuff, zero the rifle, but then we also get them going on ballistic software, and we, obviously talk about fundamentals of marksmanship, and then we validate and true data out to about 500 yards. So we push everybody in the class out to 500 yards, make sure the ballistic data is lining up for them, and then we have a field course at the end of it that they can shoot through to kind of test, that data on something more practical, like a 10-inch size steel plate, putting them in various positions. So there's definitely some instruction that goes along with it as far as like shot placement, getting into a good stable position and things like that. And then the big takeaway, I feel like from the class, is that they walk away with a zeroed gun and confirmed ballistic data that they can use to go do whatever they're going to do.
I would have to think that equates to high-level confidence, when that person hits the field.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, like as an instructor, I feel like the biggest takeaway from students that I've seen is they just get a lot of context on themselves as shooters.
Okay.
Maybe they haven't done these shooting in these positions that we put them in. We do traditional shooting positions too, like shooting offhand. But even like getting stable off a tree branch or something like that, like they don't have a ton of time doing that, or they haven't really practiced it. And we're doing that and shooting these challenging targets like 10-inch size, vital zone size steel plates, and then they can kind of gain context, get a sense of what they need to do to get stable, and I think the takeaway is like they gain context on what they can get away with and what they have to do to get stable and ultimately further their capability. So
gotcha. How many days is the course?
2 days.
2 days?
Yep, 2 days.
Is it 1 day classroom, 1 day, I guess, practical, or is it, what's the split on that?
Yeah, so we do a little bit of classroom each day. I would say it's a little bit more heavy on the first day. We're talking about actually, the zero theory and why we zero at the distances we zero at. Talk a little bit about the rifle and the optic and what we're looking for. Everybody's application is different, obviously. And then we get into shot placement, game anatomy, like bullet construction and the effects as far as like terminal ballistics and stuff like that goes. And then on the second day, we do mention wind deflection and talk about that and like how to compensate for it. And then shots when you have like an extreme angle. And then we get them going as far as like collecting data. So there's a little bit of classroom. I would say it's like 40-60. 40% classroom, 60% like out on the range, out in the field shooting.
Gotcha. So Erik, you're not a new hunter.
Correct.
You're not a new shooter. And so that was one of my early, who's signing up for the class? Now, it sounds like it might be geared a little bit more towards, a person who has some experience and wanting to elevate that. But Erik, you have this experience, and when I talked with you post-course, which was kind of the impetus for us having this talk right now, you're like, oh no, there's still some stuff to learn out there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, Corey, you hit the nail on the head. The biggest takeaway for me is like really understanding what that cutoff, like what you can, like, okay, for example, I didn't miss a shot less than 400 yards. under a variety of different positions. But as soon as I had to shoot out to 500, whatever, all of a sudden maybe you miss or whatever. It kind of helps you understand what your max effective range is. Like you can sit there at a known distance at 500 yards and you know, under a perfect rest, kind of sit out there all day and ring steel.
Mm-hmm.
But once you start shooting it off these like more unconventional positions, off a backpack, off you know, a fence post, off like natural cover like a tree or something like that, that's where I think you really start to understand the practical limitations of your rifle. So that was the biggest thing for me. But then the other thing that was really cool is going through, like, I mean, like you mentioned, Mark, I've hunted my whole life. I've gun hunted my whole life. So definitely
I've seen you make some good shots. In fact, it should be noted. I think Erik might have the record for getting 3 shots off at a game animal with a bolt-action rifle. You can check it out. We plug this all the time. It's one of my favorites.
Yep.
Alders to Alpine, a Kodiak, Blacktail Bonanza.
Very fast on the bolt. Yeah, doing deer drives in northern Wisconsin taught me that.
That'll get you trained up.
Yeah. But anyways, the where I was going with that is like, so I grew up doing all this stuff, right? But for me, once we went through on the first or day 2, the first thing that we did was we started truing the ballistic data that we gathered the day before. So day 1, we shot guns through chronographs. We got our muzzle velocity, all the things to build out a rifle profile and geoballistics, and then we trued that data the first thing day 2.
Okay, gotcha, right.
And I just went through and like 100 out to 500, never missed. So the data was spot on, but then as soon as we went out and started doing the field course, I'm a very competitive person, and I wanted to like, I also was thinking we were being timed too, so I'm like, oh man, I'm going to like just clean this thing fast. The first shot that I had was 170 yards, and I missed it.
Oh, no.
And
like offhand? What was your position?
No, shooting off a backpack. You know, like seated off a backpack. So what that was the biggest takeaway for me the whole 2 days, because I could sit out there at 500 yards, and when I was doing my part, when I was like letting myself calm down, focus on the execution of the shot, I was, you know, no problem. But that first shot of like the, you know, your more elevated heart rate, you got some stuff on the line. So think like in a hunting scenario, hey, you've got a fleeting glimpse of this critter at whatever distance. I missed that shot, and I immediately hit the follow-up. But like 170 yards, that was probably the second closest target we shot at all day long, and I freaking missed it off a backpack, you know?
Like you said, though, treating it the way you were treating it is very similar to a hunting situation where, you know, time can be of the essence. You might have a quick shot. Obviously, you want to take a responsible shot, but, you know, we have more or less time depending on the opportunity. And that's a good reminder, right?
Yeah. And I'm aware. I'm self-aware of this. This is a thing that you don't get the name Slingin' Rick for no reason. So some background on that is prior to coming to Vortex, I worked at a show where I worked for a TV show. We filmed our hunts, all that stuff, and I had a moment that kind of like was that aha moment for me. And I had this real big buck. It was a bow hunt. Had this real big buck coming down like a 33-yard, you know, perfectly broadside trail. I mean, you can sit out there in the summer at 33 yards all day, and you'd have to try to miss your Glendale buck target, you know, because you're just you're repetitive, you're in the zone. But as soon as you start actually, you know, being in a real scenario, your heart rate's elevated. You start to blank on different things. Anyways, this deer comes through. I stop him, and watching the film after the fact, literally I stopped him and I just punched the trigger immediately. Right. Like I got that pin on the deer and just punched the trigger, and I hit him, ended up killing the deer, but it wasn't a great shot. Took a long time to find him. And anyways, ever since that moment, I've been very aware of like the importance of slowing down, and that was magnified on the first target of the field course on day 2. Just, I know that's what I did, and it's something that I think everyone should kind of be aware of. Like, you have more time than you think.
That's what you're bringing up there, something that, and I think slowing down and at least knowing or giving yourself more time is something maybe you learn over time.
Yep.
I used to be a lot the same way, even with my rifle shots, like, oh my gosh, there's my opportunity, bang, you know. Now I'm way more focused on taking my time and making one good shot.
Yeah.
So I don't have to hopefully make a follow-up shot. I'm ready for it if I have to, but my goal is to make one good shot. And frankly, I've probably let some opportunities slip through the cracks.
Sure.
And not actually taking the shot because I'm like, no, you know, the critter's at this distance. I want to be able to get prone in this scenario. I'm going to stack packs. I'm going to do a couple things to build my position. And when I definitely could have gotten a shot off, maybe offhand, right? But then what's the result? Are you looking for a crippled animal?
Right.
Do you not find it? Are you kicking yourself because you did rush it and take the shot, you know, and you didn't build that position? So there's give and take there. Like you talked about, Eric, some of that give and take and Corey comes down to the scenario. Like 100 yards offhand, pretty quick opportunity. I got a high level of confidence there.
Yeah.
400 yards, we're going to have to do something different.
Totally.
Yeah. And another takeaway from that too is like you don't always have time though either. Like you mentioned taking your time, and sometimes, that's a good idea. But a lot of times it's like, okay, this is the scenario. Like, how do you gain stability the most efficiently and get your shot off as quickly as you can? Because you probably don't have all day. So that's part of it. Like when we're going through the field course and shooting those 10-inch targets, what we'll do as instructors is we'll kind of talk through, okay, this is the scenario, and this is how I would approach it. And then we go through, we build a position, and then we take a shot on the target. And it's just to give them context on like, hey, this would be ideal if I can do this. But at the end of the day, we tell them they can manage it however they want. You can navigate it, get into whatever position given these parameters, however they want. We just try to give them like, this is how you get stability in this type of position. So that was a cool thing about watching Erik go through, because he does have some experience. So sometimes he would, try to get into a position like that, but sometimes he would do things that weren't as, like in alignment with what we were talking about. And he would do pretty well. Like with some of them. So that was really cool to see that. But that's part of it, is just like here's a scenario. How do you gain stability? Because if you can get stability, you can get your shot off a lot quicker. Yeah. And then you can hit that target.
Yeah.
So.
And from the sounds of it, you're giving people opportunities to get that experience. Like I look at it, you look at any scenario, right, where it pops up. You kind of have to assess and read the situation. Like you said, if there are trees around, that might be your best bet. If there's no trees, you might have to stack some packs. But it's interesting because I've hunted with some, first time hunters, and you get an opportunity, and like instantly, the whole supercomputer reads the situation, and you're like, I would do this, this, and this, and this, and then. But for that newer person that's hasn't maybe had as many opportunities, and man, I think that's what it takes a lot of times is those reps are those reps. Yeah. And so you're kind of building those reps in.
Yeah, for sure. And it's cool to see like how everybody approaches it. Like I said, like we tell them like, this is what I would do. This would give you the most stability. And then, a lot of times they'll start off one way and then they'll kind of float to what we were talking about. So that is pretty cool to see. But overall, like I think people that come through the course, like they see a lot of success afterwards. Like I've had multiple people come, like after they've taken a class, like come back to Vortex Edge or send pictures about like their hunt and the animals that they harvested. And sometimes they don't. And I just talk to them later and they tell me about it. I'm like, man, you got to send me those pictures.
Right.
I want to see those.
Definitely.
Right.
And that's, I think, if I was going to recommend this course to like anyone, I mean, of course, anyone that just wants to, learn the fundamentals of marksmanship is going to get that out of this course. But I think the sweet spot is, I'm thinking I have a couple buddies that fit this demographic. My wife fits this mold a little bit, where like someone that's comfortable around a rifle, understands how to shoot, but maybe needs a little bit of confidence on building that foundation to shoot in some of these more awkward positions. Because it's one thing to sit there at a bench and, under ideal circumstances, ring steel all day long, or, cloverleaf, a perfect group at 100 yards, whatever. But it's a totally different animal when you're trying to shoot in some of these more real world scenarios. And that's what the course does such a good job. I mean, the biggest one, the biggest eye-opening position that we shot out of was when we shot through the fence for me, and we had the tripod. Oh yeah, that you squeeze the rear stock of the rifle up against that tripod, and you don't really have like you have obviously the front of the gun supported on the crossbeam of the fence, but I was, I guess, surprised by how rock solid that was.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that was a position where I'd be like, maybe fighting a little bit of like wobble from tension from holding the stock against the tripod. But that was one of the most solid positions. And I guess to illustrate that, like you're in a standing position, you have a wide base. You have the picture, a cattle gate or something like that. You've got the gun over one of the rungs of the gate, and then you've got a tripod fully extended up to standing height. And essentially what you're doing is you're squeezing one of the legs of the tripod up against the rear part of the stock. And man, I was blown away by how steady I could get out of that.
And that's another example of a timing thing too. So if you were to like just take the tripod out of the mix and try to get stable on that cattle gate, the cattle gate was really wobbly.
Okay.
It would take you a long time to, and like you'd have to probably take a shot you're not super comfortable with and maybe hit it, maybe not.
Yep.
So throwing that tripod in there saves you a ton of time. You got the stability you need and you can get your shot off like a lot quicker.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I can see potential scenarios that match that here in the Midwest, or out west as well. We got a lot of egg land, we've got fences, things like that. You might be set up in a spot where you are going to essentially shoot standing. You got tall grass, maybe you got some, and then some egg and a field edge that you're trying to shoot to. Maybe you are doing like some sort of drive scenario where you can set up, have the tripod set up, and then be waiting for that standing shot, which is generally really hard, right?
Yeah.
But now you've been able to get stable and you're maximizing your time there too.
Yeah, and the way we run the field course too, we try to like sort of represent reality or what like the situation might be. So like we would brief what's going on, what the position would be and where the target was at. Everybody would find their range to target. We don't give them the ranges to targets. They have to find that themselves with their laser rangefinder. And they have all that information, right? They can have that dialed on their gun. But then we put them on a timer, a little shot timer.
Oh, the timer. That's the worst. I hate the timer.
And everybody's also watching you, too. So we shoot in squads of like 4 or 5 or so.
Yep.
So you're up, you're on the timer, and beep, you build your position, and then you attempt to shoot on that vital zone size target, whatever the situation might be. Prone at 480 yards or off a pack at 170 or whatever it might be. Some of the stages have multiple targets too, so you'd shoot one and then you'd have to transition and then shoot another one.
Okay.
But you have 2 minutes to build your position and then engage the targets that you have to from that position.
Yeah.
So I think there is, like, we try to like represent like, sort of a real scenario. And I feel like the stressors, I mean, you could probably speak to that, Eric. Like everyone's watching you, you're on the timer.
Definitely.
Like the heart rate gets up a little bit.
Definitely. And you alluded to another thing that is one of the underappreciated benefits of taking the course was using your rangefinder. I know that sounds so freaking basic, but you're trying to range some of these steel plates and they're up on a fence post oftentimes, or like they're elevated, right? So like the steel plate might be at 260 yards, but it's on a horizon and then the backdrop is maybe 412. So even just like different strategies of using your rangefinder, popping into scan mode, scan the bottom of the target, the top of the target, what's beyond it. You can like just little. Those are the small details that in the field go south really quick, and then you're like, how the heck did I miss that shot? But by running yourself through preseason prep gauntlet like the hunter marksmanship course, I mean, you guys talked about that, and I remember thinking like, man, I never really like. That's something I've always just taken for granted. I've used a rangefinder since I was 12 years old, and I've always just pointed it at what I want to range and ranged it, and never really took time to get like a perfect range. But that is something that is, especially as you get out to those longer distances, it's much more magnified.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have forgiveness on those little 10-inch targets. You need to know what the range to target is. So, and that's what you want to know in real life too. You want to hit that vital zone size target, whatever that might be. We try to emphasize the range estimation portion of it because, like you said, it tends to be overlooked.
Yeah, definitely.
A little bit, but
I feel like you said, overlooked. Scan mode is an overlooked, underutilized feature, at least in our units, which I'm the most familiar with, it's so easy to access. It's the same button press. You just hold it down, and being able to just like you scan with it, as the name implies. And you can be like, oh, okay, I'm on it, whatever, we'll say 300 yards, and then boom, you pop off and it goes to, 420. You're like, okay, the target's 320 or whatever
Yep.
that is. I've met a lot of experienced hunters. They're like, oh, I didn't know it had that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, it's just just a good reminder. And
Definitely.
and, man, I use that thing all the time.
Definitely. Yeah. So I mean, that was just one of the those small things that kind of come through in taking a class like that. And I mean, from my standpoint, I was in Alaska on that bear hunt 2 weeks before this hunt, and I missed that shot at that bear that we've talked about on a different podcast. I can say with a lot of confidence, if I would have taken this course before going up to Alaska, that shot probably would have been a different outcome. Just because I would have had more of, and not to say you still don't get excited. You still, I mean, that's what happened in that scenario. I got excited and my fundamentals went
absolute
to the wayside.
giants can do that to a person.
Yeah. But it's that's taking a course like this, I guess, puts the emphasis on building that foundation. And if you do that, your shot more likely than not is going to be true.
Yeah.
So,
well, and along with that too, it's a good note on just practice, which I'm guilty of not doing enough, but just, even just getting some of those reps in before you go, you get comfortable, you're familiar, even just like the recoil, like all those things, like you go in, you're like, it's almost like, yep, I've been here.
Yeah. Yeah, I took the class with my Tika 6.5 Creedmoor, awesome rifle. I always thought of that gun as like a 300-yard gun. I'd have no problem shooting that thing out to 500 yards after going through what we went through.
Yeah, and you got to think, we put it into perspective for you guys too. So when you're staring at that 10-inch target and it's at like 380, it looks tiny.
Yep.
You barely see it out there.
Exactly.
And people are hitting it pretty consistently. So
for sure,
seeing what you're capable of.
Yep.
And, I think that's a confidence builder for a lot of people. So,
no doubt.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, Mark, I know you got something, but before I forget that thought, when I'm practicing with my bow, I always like to double the distance I'm going to shoot. So if I want to, if I want my whatever, let's say my cutoff is 50 yards, I want to be shooting at 100 yards with my bow, which I know that sounds ridiculous, but it sure makes that 50-yard shot feel like nothing, and it definitely makes the 20-yard shot feel like nothing. So same thing, shooting those little 10-inch plates with your rifle at 500 yards, now it's going to make that shot at 300 yards on a full-size deer feel much more doable, and your confidence is just going to skyrocket there. So
yeah, your confidence goes up, and it kind of dovetails into what you said earlier too. But you got to if you're shooting a big plate and it's you're ringing steel, and you got all that forgiveness built into a bigger plate, and it feels good and definitely can build confidence. But then you start to scale those down, and number one, it makes you a better shooter, but then it kind of helps you figure out, that max effective range in each one of those positions.
And things come into context for people. Like when we were shooting, there was a 10-inch steel plate at about 500.
Yep.
And everyone was shooting at it in the prone position. So 500 yards, obviously you need to know your range to target. There's not much forgiveness there. But then you also need to understand the wind conditions you're shooting in and make a good wind call.
Yeah.
Otherwise you will miss the target. So, and that can play out differently. Like maybe if it's early morning and there's no wind, your confidence on that target's probably going to be a little bit higher than if it's midday and there's a lot of gust and lulls and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I think just people understanding that helps them out significantly too.
Totally.
Yeah, I think, one thing when you take a course like this, and Eric, I think you did already speak to this, but it can take shots that previously, let's say you've done some hunting, right?
Yeah.
It can take shots that previously maybe you wouldn't take, or maybe have a little bit of a question mark built in. I think I can do that.
Yep.
And it turns it into a as much of a sure thing as you can get, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
What so you've given us some really good takeaways, Eric. Any other things that you took away from the course that even perceptions of the course going in, your perception of the course going out, and any other tips that you're like, oh man, I found that really interesting, surprising, I learned something there?
Yeah, for me, honestly, just using the GB app. I've used our geoballistic software, especially before we launched the Impact and the Razor 4000, and some of the new product demos. But it's one thing to sit there in a new product demo and someone is screen sharing and you're kind of going through and kind of trying to follow what they do. It's a totally different thing when you're actually building your data, you're actually referencing your chart and all that stuff. So for me, I know that sounds super basic, but literally just understanding how to build the chart and how to apply that data is something that I now feel, I used to always have, I still will bug Ryan for that stuff, but
Right.
it's something like, I feel like I could do it on my own.
Right.
And before taking the course, I knew the elements I needed, and I know you need, obviously, your muzzle velocity, all your bullet information, all that good stuff, but I never felt confident enough to build it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I feel like I could build one.
Yeah.
And that's huge for if you really do want to push your rifle out to, its limits.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, that's a good point too. And the course gives people like a basic understanding of their ballistics through the software.
mm-hmm.
And like you said, we give them kind of the recipe for success because like we're walking through building a gun profile in the geoballistics as well.
Yep.
And then at the end of the day, like, how to do it now. We just did it, and you can go repeat the process for a different gun, or if you switch ammunition or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And hopefully see success in the future with it.
Yeah.
So,
It even made me feel more confident with my optic.
Okay.
Understanding, like, for instance, I have a LHT with the G4I reticle, the BDC reticle in it. And I always, just had my center crosshair be 100 yards, and I figured, like, beyond that, it was like, oh, the first one is like 200-ish. Well, now I know exactly what that is. I know exactly what the hash mark down from that is. So in those situations where time is fleeting and you might not be able to dial, I know exactly what that is. That's something that I've got burned into my memory. So, okay, you're on a pack, buck pops out chasing a doe at 360. And he stops for just a second. Well, now I feel confident taking that shot using my reticle information versus feeling like I have to dial for that. So just small things like that, I think, are the takeaways that I had that help a ton and make me feel more confident using it. So
Absolutely.
yeah, definitely.
Corey, with from I guess like a broad standpoint, most of the folks that you see take the course. What does that transformation look like before and after?
It's pretty significant. Like I said earlier, like it's mostly like context on themselves as a shooter, but then understanding how to use ballistic software and apply that in the field. Like we go through it all from 0 to 10. Like they do everything themselves, and then just seeing them, like somebody that didn't understand how to do that maybe the day before, going to like hitting 10-inch size steel plates at 500 like consistently with confidence is pretty cool, because a lot of times they don't even think like they're gonna be successful on something like that, or maybe not reasonably confident in something like that. But yeah, like Erik said, like everybody leaves like pretty happy from the course, and we've had people come back and tell us they've been successful in hunts in ways that they didn't think they could do before. And that's super cool to hear, because not a lot of our classes they don't translate like that, like our pistol and carbine classes. Like with the hunting classes, though, they go out and they put the information to practice, and it's really cool to see that come back.
Yeah, I honestly could see myself taking it, and I will do this. I'll take it again, almost on an annual basis.
Sure.
Like in the summer. I mean, think about what you do with your bow. Like as we record this, it's end of July. I've been shooting my bow 36 arrows-ish a day every day for the past like 2 months. Why would I go into a rifle hunt with 30 minutes of shooting on a 100-yard bench rest?
Yeah, I think it should be cited in from last year.
And like that Ryan and I had a conversation about that the other day, and it's just like that kind of stuck with me. I'm like, man, like I'm very detail oriented with my bow. Why would I not do that with my rifle? So yeah, I mean, it's fun. You come out of it feeling ready. And what more can you ask for? Have fun and feel confident at the same time is pretty cool.
Yeah,
very cool. Well, whether you're a new hunter or shooter, or have some experience like old Slinging Rick over here, who may be doing a little less slinging.
Yeah.
After taking the
still
course,
be shooting. I just hope to be hitting
That's
more.
true. I don't even know why I said that. Corey, how does a person find this course, sign up for it?
Our website, go to the training, Vortex Edge, and then our classes are actually booked up for this year. We have a couple extra on this class coming up, so we're trying to fit people into them as much as we can.
Yeah.
But you find them on there. People do drop out last minute sometimes, so sometimes seats do open up. So if they go get on the wait list on the hunter marksmanship class,
gotcha.
They'll get an email immediately if somebody drops out of that class. But then as they get added next year, they'll pop up in that same location. So
yeah. And a shameless plug too, just to subscribe to the Vortex Edge email.
Okay.
So classes drop the first day of every month. And we send out an email the first day of every month. So if people are on that list, whether they're on the wait list or subscribe to the email, like they get a real-time notification of, hey, new classes just dropped. You know, you can get in before, you know, people that might not be aware of that. So it is a cool little value add if you're, you know, part of that email group. Like obviously you get some cool stuff emailed to you, but you also get opportunities to get into the classes before other folks.
Be the first to know.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Awesome.
So we'll post all those links in the show notes.
Yeah, perfect.
And I would just like to say too, like it's like people don't have to worry too much about their equipment. Obviously there's certain equipment that works better, like an optic with exposed turrets that you can dial. But we've had people come through the course with equipment that I wouldn't call like super ideal. And like they maybe have, you know, a reticle that can be limiting and they're using holds to engage targets. And they actually do, you know, pretty well. They learn their equipment better, but it's a learning course, a learning environment. So people just, you know, they understand what they have throughout the course, and if they want something different, they can get it, but they understand their equipment to a much higher degree after the 2 days. So I just wanted to make sure people didn't think they had to go and
for sure,
like have something special in order to do it.
Well, and to that point, maybe you don't need that, but you're going to get exposed to some of these other things and be like, oh, I see that. I like that. Maybe I got to take a look through it. Maybe I got to use something that I'm, you know, less familiar with.
Yeah.
And then because new gear is like awesome. So then you end up buying something.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
But awesome. Well, thank you guys. Thanks everybody for listening. Sign up for the Vortex Edge newsletter. Check out the website. Get your updates there. Hopefully sign up for these classes and maybe we'll see you here at Vortex. Bye everybody.